Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate that. My name is Matt Turner, the superintendent. Very excited to have you here this evening for this work. This is our first meeting of our portrait design team. And tonight is not simply an event, but tonight is the start of a process. We've invited you as constituents from different parts of Boone County, and your knowledge, your ideas, your experience, your feedback, your perspectives are all valued as we will work together to develop a set of student competencies and a new strategic plan for the Boone County schools. Through this process, we will be framing a new vision and guiding principles for the growth of our students, our employees, and our school communities. Now, over my educational career of 30 years, I've been very blessed to work in 5 different school districts in different areas all around Kentucky, and to hold positions that have shaped and influenced my understanding and my philosophies of education. Now, these experiences for me include rural, urban, suburban settings, small towns, and metropolitan areas in schools that are large, medium, and very small. I was fortunate also to teach in an elite program for Kentucky's best students in the Governor Scholars Program, and I've also worked in communities that have a very large percent of students that have socioeconomic disadvantages. With these broad experiences, I can say without a doubt that Boone County is like no other. It's very unique. Boone County is a very special place with many, many special people like you. Our portrait design team, and that's you, that consists of students, parents, teachers, and staff members, school leaders, our Boone County Board of Education members, and district leaders. As our school district serves the community and also the workforce needs of our county and also this tri-state area, we've also invited our business leaders, some government leaders, and other leaders from our community. My thanks go to each of you for your work here tonight and for the coming months. Thank you very much for the time and energy you are dedicating to this process. Now, as leaders, we have to recognize this moment of time right now where we are. Over the last 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented significant challenges to our students, to our parents, to our educators, as well as the entire community and our business leaders. COVID-19 has also exposed and exacerbated some of the systemic inequities that we see that affects our families and our students. The COVID-19 pandemic has also presented us the opportunity to work together, to collaborate with each other, and to reset the vision of the Boone County schools. The development of a portrait of a graduate that we're working on here tonight will serve as a North Star for our expectations of our students, our educators, and our community. Now, while we as a school district and community work to affect meaningful change within our schools and our whole system, we recognize that these changes will have to be scaled across our entire district. A thorough evaluation of practices that might impede what we're wanting to do and some of the changes we're talking about is going to be critical to create conducive conditions for this transformation of our district and schools. This moment presents an opportunity to re-envision district and school missions, goals, policies, and practices that will allow each of our students to be prepared for the 21st century. As a school district, we've already begun such transformational work with a few of our colleagues across the state in the Kentucky Department of Education Local Laboratories of Learning, and also the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education. For we must have an assessment system across the state and for our students that drives and signals the future readiness of our students, and it also values local accountability measures. Our school district must be equipped to nurture the whole child, which requires deeper learning and more complex, comprehensive models of assessment that measure a progress around a broader definition of student success. As the nonprofit Battelle for Kids wrote to U.S. Secretary Miguel Cardona last spring, they said this: new models of assessment, such as project-based, performance-based, and student-led assessments require more time and intensive professional learning to employ. But when done well, they provide educators, students, and families with richer information about their students' learning and the readiness to thrive and contribute in the 21st century. So in summary, we're starting an incredible journey together. We will listen and learn from each other. We will dream for our students of our community by developing a set of competencies for them that are key to their continued growth and success. The process of developing these student competencies will require deep and thoughtful work from each of us, with conversations by each of you and our entire community. This process will force us to wrestle with how our world is changing and the implications that those changes have on our school system and our students. For example, how do we equip all students for the workforce of tomorrow? How do we best prepare students to be adaptive, empathetic, and lifelong learners who are productive contributors to their communities and to our country? And lastly, how do we cultivate learner agency and pathways while also ensuring students' overall well-being? As I mentioned in the beginning, our specific goal is to develop a portrait of a graduate, of a Boone County Schools graduate, that is. Along with these student competencies, we will develop a new strategic plan with measurable goals and outcomes for which we'll have to hold ourselves accountable. This is a very exciting task and an exciting time. And again, I thank you for your time and your energy, and I appreciate each of you being here. So now I'm going to introduce our facilitator this evening. Please welcome Dr. Fuji.
Brilliant comment. Thank you very much. Good evening. As he recognized me, let me ask this question. Can we give a round of applause to our superintendent, please? Being a leader today certainly requires a skill set that we may or may not have been equipped for. I can say Superintendent Turner clearly seems like this is something he was made to do. Congratulations. In addition to Superintendent Turner, if you are a building leader or a district level administrator, would you take a moment and please stand? Let's give these folks a round of applause for everything that they've led. You can take the mask off? Okay, I'm far enough away. Oftentimes this frightens folks, so thanks for that permission. In addition to our building level and district level administrators, if you're an educator tonight in this space, would you take a moment, stand and be recognized by our community for all of the things that you've done over the last 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, our teachers. Really, they went to college. They really want to serve this community and our students, and nothing could have prepared them for this moment in time. In addition to our educators, you know, we're joined this evening, as Superintendent Turner said, by a whole host of community and business leaders. Let me turn first to our parents. Ladies and gentlemen in the room, if you are a parent of a current student or a former Boone County student, would you stand up for a moment and be recognized? Look, educators, you should find some comfort in the fact that our parents are here in this space and in this evening to give their ideas about what their hopes, dreams, and aspirations are for every child. That donation of time is not something that we should think is insignificant, because you're here not about a tax levy, not about a referendum issue, not about all of the types of things that might be happening in school board meetings today, but you're here to provide guidance and insights. Thank you very much for that. Next up, one more group. If we could recognize our business and community leaders, whether that's Rotary or privately held or publicly held organizations here in this community who are giving your guidance and your expertise in this field. Would you please stand and be recognized? Several. Thank you very much. Certainly your expertise in this space in terms of giving your intellectual capital and your understanding of the world of work today and the world of work that you're designing for is critical as we look to guide this portrait of a graduate process as Superintendent Turner discussed. And finally, I know that we have a whole host of a full board of education in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're on our board of education here in Boone County, would you please stand for a moment? What I would say about you is when you were elected, whether that was this past November, 2 years ago, or you're a 20-year member of the Board of Education, this is certainly a time like no other. And having you in this space to guide this process is also critical because you serve as the conduit between the public school system, our families in this community. Thank you for your service. As Mr. Turner said, my name is Steve Fuji. I have the pleasure and privilege of being a senior director with Battelle for Kids. Along with me this evening is my dear friend and colleague, Mrs. Erica Siddle. Erica is right back here. Erica is the mother of a second grader and a kindergartner. And she enters this space not only as a parent of a child who is working towards 21st century aspirations and goals, but she also enters this space as a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, which means that as a project manager and my colleagues, she keeps me on the straight and narrow. Because the other interesting fact about Erica is she also holds her black belt in karate, which means not only does she keep projects managed, but she also kicks my behind side if they're not managed appropriately. So I say thank you to her. My name is Steve Fuji. I've talked a little bit about myself. Just to share why I enter this space, I spent some time as a resident here in Kentucky. I served at Fort Knox, Kentucky when I went to officer basic training and enjoyed 9 months there as a scout platoon leader as well and served overseas as a commissioned military officer on active duty. That was my first career. I then entered education. Believe it or not, the military was too large at one point in our history. Back in the early 2000s, I entered education, became a 7th grade teacher, taught special education and social studies, interesting combination, and worked my way through, became a middle school principal and a high school principal, director of curriculum, so forth and so on, was most recently before coming to Battelle for Kids, a superintendent of a small city school district in Marion, Ohio, where I served as superintendent before coming to Battelle for Kids. The other thing I might share with you is I too am a school board member, locally elected in Delaware County, and I happen to be the parent of a current high school junior and a current college freshman. That's my daughter there in the picture on the right. I happen to be able to be on the school board and hand her a diploma when she graduated during this very unique pandemic time. So that's one of the greatest points of pride for me in my personal life. But it's also what brings me into this space tonight. Because when we talk about what's important for us in Boone County, that's really what our organization hopes to partner with Boone County to talk about. The power and promise for 21st century learning as we consider opportunities for students in our school system and beyond. You know, ma'am, I got all the way through this. I'm 5 minutes in, and I failed to say, what is it, Who Day, Rise Up, Go Bengals, something along that line. I should have led with that, shouldn't I? I'm so sorry. But we talk about Battelle for Kids. Our mission is really about committing to the power and promise of 21st century learning for every student. And you might ask yourself, Steve, we're 22 years into this. Are we really still talking about that? And the answer is yes. The reason that answer is yes is because look at this beautiful facility here. We know this facility services 21st century learning for every student. The question becomes, how do we scaffold that and process that for every student here in Boone County? The last person I'm going to introduce you to this evening is Erica's and my virtual assistant. We call her Meeting Pulse. There's a QR code here for you. There's also a link on your agenda. When Mr. Turner talks about our desire to gather feedback from you, it really is an effort to gather feedback from you in your words. I mentioned being a tank platoon leader in the United States Army, and in that moment in time, we had a weapon system that was able of reaching out and touching somebody 1.6 miles away. If you could see it, you could touch it. The deal with that is you had to be very calibrated in order to do that. At that distance, the curvature of the earth, the barometric pressure, the temperature, the wind speed, all of these factors come into consideration. Tonight, we won't be talking about that. We're still going to be talking about hitting the target, but you happen to be the calibrating effect. All of these different stakeholder groups that stood to be recognized this evening, you all come in tonight with a very unique perspective on what Boone County can offer. When we talk about Boone County students, the most important group in that conversation is, in fact, our students, which for the last stand in recognition for a moment, I know we have some students in the room. Students, you might be a little bit embarrassed, but you did kindly applaud all of our educators and community members and parents who stood to be recognized. At this time, would our students stand up to be recognized? Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, give them the loudest round of applause yet. Thank you. I think I see a Bengal shirt on that young gentleman right there as well. This community is here for you. Not only you, but also your peers. So as you think about your engagement in this work tonight, think about the many, many students who aren't in the room with you tonight and talk about their experiences as we go throughout the evening. That should be enough about our virtual assistant. Again, that's our Meeting Pulse link. There will be at least 2 times this evening where we ask you to weigh in on your thoughts on that link. It's important that you give us your insights, both Erica and myself, because you're calibrating this process, and without your direct statements, I could be a degree off. I don't want to be that for your superintendent and for your students. I want to make sure that we have that calibration. A couple of things you'll find there. The one that I want to draw your attention to is you have an agenda, you have a folder. Every engagement that we have along this journey, you'll be able to have those documents and all of the research embedded within those documents on this platform as well. So not only will I ask for your insights, I'll also make sure that you have the materials that you need to provide those as we go through the process. Also, students, for you, I don't have Snapchat or anything like that, but you can also upload photos, because one of the goals of our portrait is to come up with something that is recognizable for Boone County, that resonates with our community, not only in terms of language, but also in terms of image. With that, our graphic demonstration of all of the stakeholders in the room, we want to thank you for not only your attendance this evening, but also your intellectual capital that you will provide as the evening goes along, and your thought leadership to create that calibration. I've now been talking for entirely too long. I'm going to invite us first to introduce yourself to the members of your table and say what brings you in this space. You've heard about Erica, you've heard from our superintendent, you've heard about me. Take a moment, introduce yourself to your table if you haven't done so. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I know that you had assigned seats when you came in here, so it's very important not only that you get to know the facilitator and the key players of the evening, but if we can come back together, it's also important that you get to know one another at your table. Tonight, throughout the evening, there will be 2 more chances to weigh in on this work, and having a foundation of where we are and who we are in that space is important. To that end, we also have some language translation services available. If you have need for a Spanish, I think we have a Spanish translator specifically, and you are more comfortable if your native language is Espanol than English, please just let my good colleague Erica know, and we'll get you a Spanish translator to either sit next to you or maybe even come up here on stage, and we'll just kind of co-host. But we want everybody to be able to weigh in. Your voice is critical. And the first moment to engage in that conversation is going to be around this video. It's a short 3-minute video. It is put together for my educator friends by a gentleman by the name of Tony Wagner and Ted Dintersmith. They're actually friends of Battelle for Kids. And this is intended to be a conversation starter. Teachers, you know you never show a video without telling folks what you're going to ask after it, right? There's a Harvard protocol called Connect, Extend, and Challenge. The Harvard protocol is from the Project Zero initiative, and it's intended just to spur thoughts. As you watch, what connects with what you already know? What extends some of your thoughts? Or what challenges you in what you saw, or what you challenge in what you saw? Connect, extend, and challenge. 3 minutes. doesn't matter how many times I see that. The robot dog thing always freaks me out a little bit. So again, the promise I made at the front, what connects with you, what are the key points, what challenges your thoughts in that space, and maybe even if you get to it, what are your hopes given if this is the future of work? Some people will say the future of work is here. Some of our business and community members might even say that. That's our prompt. Remember, we are in still this kind of global pandemic state, so I want to be sensitive to this, but I'm going to invite you to go ahead and stand up. We had our stand and be recognized moment. You got to see the other educators, the other community members, the parents, the business partners, the students in the room. I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself to somebody new, somebody you don't know, because chances are very good in a room this large, there's somebody you don't know. Get up, introduce yourself, bump elbows, give a high five, shake a hand, or keep your distance and just say hello, but take 10 minutes and respond to that video. What connects, what extends, or what challenges your thinking in that space. Questions about the prompt? We have 10 minutes. Don't be alarmed when the alarm goes off. I don't mean it to be trauma-inducing. It's actually a soft alarm, but I don't want anybody to jump. Thank you very much. 10 minutes. Hopefully you had the opportunity to meet somebody new and have a conversation about what your hopes were for students moving forward as well. For the purposes of our engagement over the period of this journey, we're going to refer to that as our North Star. As you know, a North Star is not somewhere that you ever actually get. It's what you use for navigation. We want to be able to put something out there, have a community-held opportunity for us, for our conversation, and then begin to orient or transform our district around that North Star. Our superintendent talked about the experiences that our students have now. There's no doubt in my mind that the experiences that Boone County students have in many ways are unsurpassed and the best possible. The conversation is how do we take the best elements of that and move it all the way through our system so that every child is having rigorous academic experiences. This journey that we'll be on together really has 4 meetings to it. Tonight, we'll talk about our why, our purpose, the landscape shifts. That's really our terminology for how has the world changed in the last generation. You might be laughing under your masks, and I just can't tell it, because the question isn't really how the world has changed in the last generation. The question is, how has the world changed in the last 2 daggone years, right? How has the world changed in the last 2 years? Have a and it doesn't matter what the research says. It matters what you in Boone County say. To that end, you have access to all of the research that is baked into these slides. Mrs. Siddle provided, Erica provided for us in your handouts all of the research so that if I'm going too fast or talking too quickly, which I am guilty of, you'll be able to go back and reflect and see. Once we talk about how the world has changed in the last 2 years, we'll move on and ask the question, what are the essential skills and habits of mind for our students then in navigating that world? It's not that there weren't jobs in the video I shared. You just didn't see them. There were still bricklayers who were supervising the machines. There were still auto mechanics that were supervising or fixing the robotic vehicles. All of those jobs still exist. It's just they exist differently. That leads us then to the question that we have to ask ourselves about what will it take for students to be successful in that space. Many of our business leaders in the room will have a direct expertise there, so that we can create a shared vision in meeting 3 and bring back to you a portrait of a graduate for all Boone County students moving forward. So our first meeting tonight is this consideration of landscape shifts. I already kind of gave the spoiler alert there, that it's how has the world changed in the last generation. To our educator friends, and what are the learning experiences provided in that space? If we believe the world has changed, how are we adapting our educational services to meet that changing demand? We'll process these in 4 big buckets. Let me be clear, these buckets are not discrete or separate inherently from any other bucket. There are some common themes that roll throughout them. However, the research and literature scan that we've done tends to point to these as independent enough that they warrant conversation. The ask at the end of this night from you in terms of that calibration is how much are these things prevalent in the world here in Boone County? How important are they from your perspective? Certainly there will be things tonight that don't merit importance from your perspective. And other things that I hope, will merit great importance from your perspective. So however you enter as a parent, as a teacher, as a community and business member, as a concerned citizen, as an educator, as a student, how important are these ideas? And I'll ask that question really on a 3-point Likert scale. It's critical, it's interesting, it's critical, it's important, or it's interesting. If it's interesting, it's kind of going to be a 1. And really, when I say interesting, you're just being kind to me. Like, okay, Steve, that's kind of interesting. Meh, move on. Versus critical. We must consider this for our students here. Healthcare. What are the big job opportunities around here? What must be considered? That's critical. And then you're not really sure, it's kind of in the middle. That's okay, that's a 2, that's important. That's the question that I'm going to ask you through the evening. And it's really that simple. So as you have conversations at your table, as you reflect on these ideas, are they critical, are they important, or are they interesting? And again, that interesting is just, you're being nice to me. It just means, I don't really care about that, Steve, but I'll say it's a 1. Our first round, workforce development. This is already what Superintendent Turner was keying up. So we really will spend some time here. I'll go through each of these and provide you some space to talk and chat amongst yourselves. Our first one is workforce. In the workforce, here's the example I like to give in this space. I consider myself a second-generation American citizen. My father was born to 2 Japanese parents in Hawaii in 1942. Being of Japanese descent in Hawaii in 1942 was very interesting, let me tell you. And Hawaii was not yet a state. So I'm the first of my name to be born and be born an American citizen. And during my lifetime, my father graduated from the Ohio State University. Forgive me for that. I already paid homage to the Bengals. I'm a Buckeye born and bred. My father and mother graduated from the Ohio State University during the Vietnam era. My father was an Air Force veteran as well. And when he graduated from Ohio State, he got one job. He worked at Battelle Memorial Institute, which is actually the parent company, interestingly enough, Battelle for Kids. He worked that same job for 41 years. My father worked for one company. It changed hands a number of times, but he worked for one company for 41 years. By retrospect, I'm on at least my 17th job. And I'm a first-generation American citizen. So we expect, based on 2019 research, that students who graduate are going to have somewhere around 10.4 jobs. That's on average, so some students will have many more, some students will have many less. How has the workforce changed knowing that kids are going to be changing jobs at that type of frequency? One way the workforce has changed is that of routine requirements versus non-routine requirements. Specifically, our economy was set up around our school calendar, and our economy at first was set up around an agrarian or agricultural context. We've moved to the manufacturing age when schools kind of came into session. You see with the 9-month school year the nod to the agrarian calendar and the manufacturing mentality of move from class to class to class to get other opportunities and standardized tests. That age has shifted to the information age and computer age. We actually think now we're in the high concept, high touch age because of the opportunity for robots to do much of the work that we do today. When you think about routine tasks, you think about those ideas of linear or sequential opportunities. Today's workforce requires high task variety. Congratulations, educators in the room. You certainly fall on the right-hand side of this perspective. Your job is certainly one of high variety tasks. No day is the same. Often the examples here, nonlinear processes, unique solutions. You have to possess a lot of knowledge in order to accomplish your job, and people have to trust you to make intuitive decisions. In the past, under a routine example, you had a supervisor who watched your decision-making process and could identify where in the decision-making process you went wrong. The other interesting thing about this is the routine and non-routine job discrepancy over times of economic distress. You see here January 2001, we know what happened on September 11th of that year. You start to see this discrepancy of how jobs have changed from routine growth in jobs versus non-routine growth in jobs. The non-routine jobs are the jobs that are exploding. You see the gray area of kind of our Great Recession in 2007, 8, and 9. Again, you see a further discrepancy in routine and non-routine jobs. Who will be impacted most by the loss of non-routine jobs? Often, those students or those socioeconomic demographics who are built to endure routine experiences. I'm going to go to work in a factory. Those jobs are diminishing, and those jobs are no longer providing that middle-class income that it once did. And if we're focused on improving standardized test scores, do we provide the right experiences for students in routine versus non-routine jobs? Second way that the workforce has changed is that of the service economy. One of my favorite ideas here is that 80% of jobs today have some sort of service orientation. My job is to serve Boone County School District and help. 80% of jobs being created today have some sort of service component. Where in schools do we provide opportunities for students to serve one another? What are the experiences in school around service? If occupations require frequent human interaction, then how I perform on a particular test on a particular day may not merit as much importance as it once did. To further exemplify that, we talked about growth industries. When you think about 80% of jobs today requiring a service component, I mentioned I'm a school board member. Where I'm a school board member in Delaware County is one of the fastest growing counties in the United States of America. At one point in our county, the largest employer in our county was our farmers. You could get a really good job working on a farm, 109 square miles. Several of our farmers had over 3,000 plus acres of farm field. You could work there. Today, because of automation, those jobs are dwindling. A farm that might have employed 20, 25 hands now requires 3 or 4 in addition to the family. Additionally, we know that minority populations in the service sector have been greatly impacted during the time of COVID. The third concern or topic in the workforce is that of the gig economy. Opportunity for the gig, okay, so full transparency, I'm of the generation where I remember Happy Days. Happy Days is when Arthur Fonzarelli dated Pinky Tuscadero. And Pinky Tuscadero used to play in a band, and she would go to Arnold's on the set. I don't know, it was a little restaurant. Actually, a little Asian guy ran Arnold's at one point, which is a whole different story. But Pinky Tuscadero used to try and get gigs where she and her band would play around. Gig means nothing other than students being their own boss. What does it mean for students today to be their own boss? More than that, a lot of the working age population is engaging in this more now than ever. Eric and I work with colleagues who are Marcom specialists, graphic designers, folks who work deeply in some of these other specialized areas. And guess what? They work when they want to work. They're project consultants. They work for our consulting agency as in the gig economy, and they'll choose when they take work from us and when they don't. That's a growing field. How do we help students navigate the world of the gig economy? Let me ask this question a little bit differently. And in what ways do we allow students to be the boss of their own learning versus being told what they're learning and to what degree they've been successful in that learning? There are 4 primary doors that you can enter in terms of the gig economy, and they kind of span a spectrum. The first door that you can enter, to my educator friends, it's the door of the free agents, meaning, hey, I'll work in the gig economy during the summer months. I run my own landscaping business. I'll shovel sidewalks in the summer. I'll be my own boss, and I'm going to supplement my income, and I'm going to do it out of choice. I still get my health insurance and my pay elsewhere. Versus the casual earner who's just looking to add a couple of extra bucks, and you know what? They're doing it maybe to help out. They're doing it to sell things on Facebook's selling wall. Isn't that right, Mrs. Siddle? They're looking at selling things in different modalities online and looking to purchase things there as well. The reluctants are the folks who enter the gig economy because they have to. It's their they would prefer a traditional job, but because their skill set may not be aligned to one that's out there or being offered to them right now, they're going to do this as a stopgap. And then the final kind of door to enter the gig economy is the person who is financially strapped. I've got to do this. I've got to sell this service. I've got to sell this product. I've got to do this because I don't have another way of making money right now. Second way that the world has changed is that of how quickly things have changed. Spoiler alert. Forgive me if I kind of spoil this up front. If you think things are changing quickly now, you better buckle up because this is the slowest they're going to change for the rest of our lives. It's not necessarily an exciting thought, is it? If you think things are going quickly now, you would better buckle up because things are only going to change faster as our lives continue. That might excite our students. Actually, students, have your grandparents ever called you and asked for help on a platform or with their cell phone? Yes, I got a thumbs up. Students, have your parents or grandparents ever asked you for help on how to navigate something on the web? Yes, both of them have now given me thumbs up. If we think things are changing now, guess who's used to that change? It's not people my age. Now I get it, I might be older than a lot of the folks in here, but it's not people my age. People who are used to it, people their age. One of those reasons is because of technology. This isn't meant to say that all of these things have the same computing power, but it is meant to say that roughly the idea of what was considered a computer once is now carried in our pocket. I mentioned being a commissioned military officer. Guys, that, honest to goodness, that was a computer back when I was in the military. Seriously, I'm not even joking. And that was about the size of a tennis court, and you had to keep it in an air-conditioned room. 10 years later, after the birth of my son, I could have gotten him, he was only 2 at the time, but I could have gotten him a PS3, roughly the same computer power. And now, today, we carry that same type of computer power in our pocket. What does that mean if we think that knowledge is power? What knowledge is available at our students' fingertips? Another video.
Progress with the assistant. As I said earlier, our vision for our assistant is to help you get things done. It turns out a big part of getting things done is making a phone call. You may want to get an oil change schedule, maybe call a plumber in the middle of the week, or even schedule a haircut appointment. You know, we are working hard to help users through those moments. We want to connect users to businesses in a good way. Businesses actually rely a lot on this, but even in the US, 60% of small businesses don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. So let's go back to this example. Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon. What happens is the Google Assistant makes the call seamlessly in the background for you. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
So how can I help you?
Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd.
Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around?
At 12 p.m.
We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.?
Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for?
Just a woman's haircut for now.
Okay, we have at 10 o'clock.
10 a.m. is fine.
Okay, what's her first name?
The first name is Lisa.
Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Have a great day. Bye.
So for some folks, that's their cell phone placing a call for them to get a haircut that's then populating on their Google Calendar, and they show up to the haircut. I also love it how the artificial intelligence is like, and then if you notice that the artificial intelligence also said, yeah, around 3, so that it sounded more like a normal speech pattern. It blows me away. Anyway, if we think things are changing now, how quickly have they changed based on the pandemic? One other brief story. My daughter is a freshman in college. I mentioned that. She's studying, believe it or not, Mr. Turner, to be a early education major. So if ever there's the opportunity, and Jillian Fuji applies. But she's at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And at Bowling Green State University, she can have her Starbucks or her Dunkin' Donuts delivered to her dorm with the touch of an app. So her tall caramel mocha latte, whatever, comes to her dorm. She opens up the robot just by pressing her app on her phone, and she gets out her hot coffee. What other inspirations have occurred during the pandemic? Information explosion. This one often kind of takes us a second to think about, but how do we teach students to think critically and consume and evaluate quality of information, especially when that information is being provided to us or sent to us based on mathematic algorithms? If anybody in here is on social media and you and your spouse or you and somebody are talking about, oh man, I'd really love to get that new Aura ring, and then all of a sudden you log into Instagram or something like that and there's an ad for that showing up. How are these things happening? It used to take a significant amount of time for us to consider the amount of knowledge in the world doubling. Think about it like this. If you ever have gotten a speeding ticket before, somebody would have written down that ticket. It would have been on triplicate. They'd have handed you one. They'd have kept one, and they'd have turned one into to the court or to the judge. Today, all of that information, many times that information is kept free on body camera. So there's not necessarily that hard written ticket anymore. And if you want to go and dispute that in front of the judge is just going to watch the body camera footage that he's pulling out of or she is pulling out of the cloud. That amount of knowledge is just doubling. That information is out there. If we were born at different times in human history, we would have lived our entire lives and never seen the world around us change. And yet today, between automated informations, between the amount of information that's available to us, between social media, information is just changing rapidly. Oops, wrong direction. Here's another way of thinking about it. We live in a digital world. That's not a surprise to anybody. Take a moment. I have two teenage children, a teenage daughter who's not a child. I don't know how you say that anymore. I have two teenagers that I'm responsible for still. And I have a wife who's responsible for me. In our house, we have a number of internet-connected devices. Take a moment and think about, in your house, how many internet-connected devices do you have? That includes Apple Watches, or what's the non-Apple, an Android watch, I don't know. That includes cell phones, Chromebooks, laptops, computers, Ring doorbells, Nests, HVAC systems, Apple TV, Roku. That includes light bulbs. Hey Alexa, that includes Alexa. Alexa, turn on living room light. How many internet connections? Seriously, take a moment and just think about how many devices do you have in your home that are connected to the internet? I love how you're counting. You're counting one, two. You're like going room by room in your house, aren't you? I love it. Raise your hand if you have 5 internet-connected devices in your house. At least 5. Let me say that differently. Raise your hand if you have at least 5 internet-connected devices in your house. Keep your hand up if you have 10. Keep your hand up if you have 15. Keep your hand up if you have 20. Keep your hand up if you have 25. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you with your hands up, I have 27. I know it just because I knew I was going to ask a question. I've actually counted. Who thinks they have the most? How many, sir? In the neighborhood of 30? Somebody think they have like double that? I've been in places where they're like, yeah, I have double that. I have 4 kids, Steve. You have 2. Ha ha. Think about the number of internet-connected devices. There are 300 million Americans, roughly. There's projected in the next 8 years to be 500 billion internet-connected devices that connect to the internet. 500. There's 7 billion people on the planet. And we think that there's 500 billion internet-connected devices. So if you wonder how quickly things are changing, our daggone refrigerator tells my wife when she needs to go buy eggs because we're out of eggs. That's not, I'm sorry. Our refrigerator puts eggs on the grocery list, and the next person who goes to the grocery store goes and buys the eggs. I just don't go to the grocery store. Said differently, when we think about how many, the pace of change as it relates to technology, I love this. It took the automobile 62 years to reach 500 million, or I'm sorry, to reach 50 million users. It took Pokemon Go in 2015, 19 days. It took Facebook 3 years. It took Pokemon Go 19 days. For anybody in the room who likes TikTok, how many times have you seen this dance on TikTok? And how many times did that hit? How many days, how many hours did it take for somebody doing that ridiculous dance to hit 50 million viewers? That's how quickly things kind of go viral today. The internet, it took 7 years. Pokemon Go took 19 days. And when we sent students home in March of 2020, how many of them still struggled to connect to the internet for Zoom classes, for Google Hangouts, for Skype, and for other things? What happened to all of our institutions when we went home for a period of time? Access to quality Wi-Fi, 5G, is almost a human right these days when we have 500 billion internet-connected devices. The last topic that we'll discuss in this space is that of innovation. I love this one too. The world's largest taxi company has no taxis. Anybody ever used Uber? The largest accommodation of rooms is Airbnb. This is based on 2019 as well, so over the pandemic, I wonder if Skype is still the largest telecom structure or if it's really Zoom. The world's largest movie house is Netflix. The most popular media owner creates no content, it's YouTube. And the world's most valuable retailer has no inventory. We think we're in the sixth wave of innovation, meaning that we are looking at sustainability, resource productivity, biomimicry, and green chemistry. Look at what's happening to these bands of innovation. They're getting tighter. That's how quickly things are changing. Oh. Last question at your table. Which ones of these 8 items do you believe has the most line of code? So for the novel War and Peace down there, assume that's a digital version of War and Peace. How many lines, which of these areas of Facebook, an app on almost everybody's phone, a Ford F-150, the Mars Curiosity rover, the Large Hadron Collider, War and Peace, a heart maker that literally keeps people alive, an Android phone, or a Boeing 787, which of those items has the most line of code in it? Give your vote at your table real quick. Which one do you think? It's not a quiz. Don't worry if you get it wrong. This gentleman up here has got it knocked out of the park. The answer is the Ford F-150. Now, get this. The answer is the Ford F-150 from 2016. Out of all those options, out of the fact that you're flying in a plane that's keeping you in the air, and it doesn't have as many lines of code or as complex system as the Ford F-150. I point out the fact that it's from 2016 because if you've ever watched somebody drive in a Tesla on animal mode, that's funny. And the amount of automated cars in the next 3 years, we're seeing it. It used to be, oh my gosh, I was in California or I was in Texas this one time and I saw a Tesla. They're all around our streets today. I wonder how many Eric and I passed or passed us on the way down here. Innovation's happening all around us. I've spoken entirely too long. I'm going to leave you with this quote, and you're going to talk about it at your table. Despite the increased need for high-speed, reliable internet access, many Americans are still struggling to bridge the digital divide, especially in communities of color, where the lack of broadband access reinforces systemic inequality. Here's the question for you all. In those 2 big areas that we talked about, in your sheets, they're the purple area and the green area. It's workforce and the pace of change. What do you notice here in Boone County? What do you notice for your students? Remember the guiding question at the beginning, is this critical for us to consider? Is it important for us to consider? Or is it, meh, interesting? I'm just being nice to Steve here and I'll say it's interesting. Talk about it at your table. All 6 of those areas are listed for you in your document. If you forgot one of the areas that we talked about, don't worry. It's right there for you. Erica and I will be around to answer any questions that you have. We'll come back together in 20 minutes, and I'm going to invite some folks to report out what you talked about at your table. We'll do it here at this microphone because we're on camera and we're recording this, but we'll ask you to do it by stakeholder. So I might ask an educator, I might ask an administrator, I will ask a parent, and I will ask a community member. 2 students, be ready to talk. Any questions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a conversation. I recognize the most important voice for you to hear from is definitely not from me. It is, in fact, from each other. You've had the opportunity to do that at your table. As you think about workforce changes, the gig economy, the service economy, routine to non-routine discussions, and you think about the pace of change, the purples, I would invite you, if you are a parent in the room, now here, it's important when you facilitate that you make safe space, that there's nobody whose thought or idea is wrong, nobody whose thought or idea is better than somebody else's. So the invitation in this moment is, one thing I heard at my table is, you don't have to own the thought, you don't have to dime somebody else out like, oh, Erica said. I would never do that, Erica, you know that. But it's one thing I heard at our table discussed was. So if you're a parent in the room, I would invite you, if you're willing, we'll invite 2 parents to come up and share. And the reason that we have to use them, I would invite you just to stand at your table and share, which I know is a little bit easier than having to trot up here to the microphone. But because it'll be recorded and we really want for posterity and for others to hear your thoughts, are there 2 parents in the room that would share, one thing I heard discussed at my table is, please. Otherwise, I'm going to start singing. You don't want that. 2 parents, any parent, 1 parent. Thank you very much, ma'am. Yay, that's all right, give her a round of applause. And you know what, it does, so I love to read. Brene Brown is somebody that I admire greatly. In fact, I'm a trained Brene Brown presenter, and she talks about there is no courage without vulnerability. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure. My name is Shannon Copster. I have 5 children that have been served very well through Boone County Schools. And one thing I heard at our table was the importance of preparing the children for the human interaction, because that's really a struggle now, especially given what they've been through with the pandemic, and how important that will be for them to be successful in any job that they go after, whether it be right after high school or after college or getting into college or any type of situation where they need to be able to interact to be successful.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Shannon, please. Is there another parent that would like to, now that the ice has been broken, is there another parent who would like to share? One thing I heard at my table discussed was, please, yes ma'am. Thank you for your courage. Yay. Like, I mean, I guess we could do it now representing table 15.
Mr. Gatewood knows that I like to hear myself talk. So one thing that we had, or a couple ideas that we had to come from our table, which directly kind of correlates with what she said, is, communication. We notice that our kids have a lot of lack of communication because everything, they want to text. They don't want to call. They don't want to, speak. So that human interaction is definitely going to be key in addition to learning how to communicate and have those skills to even, be able to have a telephone call or a face-to-face, a Zoom meeting, a Skype meeting. That's what I do all day. And then the other piece that we talked about was critical thinking. I've noticed a lot that some of these skills that I think some of us older people generated when we were young, and they're really having to problem solve. With the technology, it makes it so easy. So, there's, when I think of, even talk to my own kids, I've got 3, elementary, middle, and high, so I've got 1 of each. And ask them, to do, something that I think should be kind of either common sense or easy to do, and to solve a problem, sometimes that's lost, and they're kind of like, can we Google that? It's like, no. So, kind of trying to get back to those skills, where we actually physically have to think about something, do something on a paper versus just through a piece of technology. I think it's something that we need to try to migrate back to, because even in my job, I'm doing accounting and advising, and we've got some newbies that come in, our young staff, so I'll call them politely, You know, some of the things that, you know, I take the initiative and do and can run with, they sit and they can't figure it out. So, you know, again, because it's more the thinking and the skills that I've learned from the way that I've grown up versus everything being handed to me on electronic. So technology is great, but I still think that we need to have that step back.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please. So here's what I love about this is the natural progression of, okay, if this is what we believe about the world, then how do we address it? So I heard some of that already. Communication, collaboration, critical thinking, all very important skills, absolutely. This conversation was around the shifts themselves of the pace of change and the workforce. And I believe fundamentally that teachers are teaching critical thinking skills. How uniformly are we using that term maybe is something we might want to discuss. Do I have an educator who's willing to, again, the prompt is, something I heard discussed at my table was, yes ma'am, come on up. Thank you very much. There you go. Look at the kindness in this room. They're excited to hear what you have to share.
Okay, so our table talked about technology, and we actually had a debate about the aspect of technology and how we do think our students are very comfortable, but the access isn't there for all of our students.
Oh,
so even whenever we had free Wi-Fi offered, not every student was in that free Wi-Fi area. So we looked at it from those 2 points of, yes, they are very comfortable, but some students literally don't have the option. They're not in a serviced area to get that technology.
Well said. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. And now, because I was able to eavesdrop on one table, I also want to share. A table stopped me, table 12 specifically, round of applause then, but stopped me and said, hey, Steve, we're struggling a little bit because, you know, should we be talking about these landscape shifts in terms of what our kids have access to now? Or should we talk about where our deficits are now? And my response to that was, and it's honestly the first time I've been asked that in one of these engagements, really the purpose of this is to come into it from an aspirational perspective. Like, if every kid had equal access, here's what we think is really important to us. Or actually, let me rephrase. Here's what we think is critical for us. Let's think about it from the aspirational side. Because as Superintendent Turner said, the work that follows this is the strategic plan. The work that follows this is the work to close those gaps. And we have to identify what we think is important to close those gaps first. So thank you very much to both of you. How about this? Do I have an administrator who would be willing to share? And then my last ask will be a business member or community member. Is there an administrator in this district willing to share? Here's something we discussed at our table. Oh, so I was a special education teacher, so I believe in wait time. I'll outwait you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Nobody wants to be here all night. A round of applause. You can't imagine the amount of patience it requires to be a 7th grade special ed teacher. I'm telling you, I learned wait time. So I have no problem. When you get uncomfortable, that's when I enjoy it.
Awesome. So I'm sitting with a great group of people, and
way to shout out your table. Well done.
Shout out to table 18. It's really good to hear perspectives from different people.
Yes.
My name is Linda Black. I am the Director of Teaching and Learning for the elementary schools. And one of the things that we talked about is every one of the subscriptions is for our students. And we do know that that's who we want to serve, but we also said we could plug in our teachers need professional learning around all of these. And so, you know, we're tasked at the district level to work with new teachers that are coming out. And we would hope by now they would be coming out with some of these skills, some of these talents, and we're just not seeing it yet. So, you know, our colleges and universities need some education in this area too.
Amen. Here's what I love about what you just shared. You're also seated at the table with the association president, the person here advocating for staff, and you're talking about, hey, some of our teachers need this support as well.
Yes.
Well, a round of applause. Thank you very much. And I just met the associate. Come on, that's a little bit impressive, right? I remembered that, Mr. Reed. Our last focus group tonight to come up and share what was discussed at your table or something that resonated would be our business or community members. Is there a business member? I know we have some healthcare CEOs or executives. Yes, ma'am, please. Ron, yeah, there you go.
Hi, I'm Lois Post, and I work at St. Elizabeth, and I'm a nurse by trade. However, I also taught at the college level, and currently I'm the manager of health career education, and otherwise known as work-based learning opportunities at St. Elizabeth. So I promote all those wonderful health careers that are open and available. We were talking at our table about the routine to non-routine work, and our concern is that even though a lot of it is transitioning to non-routine, you still need key foundational work. Our concern is, are those expectations going to be pushed down to the lower grades? I mean, that's a concern for me, for you guys at the elementary level, saying, are we going to start requiring students to start algebra at 4th grade? I don't know. They may be doing it now. I don't know.
To my knowledge, no, Algebra 1 is not a 4th grade opportunity.
So that's my concern is, are they going to have the foundations, and what's that going to mean to the educational sector so they can start those higher applications?
Great. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please. And you bring up such an important point that I went ahead and called something that I was going to talk about next time we're together into this very presentation right now. That you are 100% right. In no way do we intend to say, whether the focus is on routine to non-routine or nonlinear tasks, that anything other than deep, rigorous academic content isn't critical for us to consider. It's foundational. 3rd grade reading, 9th grade algebra, is important for us to think about in terms of student success. The question we get to ask ourselves is, to what degree should we also think about these skills and mindsets? What are the common ideas that we have to think about here, which is why I give the one table, a ton of credit, because this is already where their mind went. They were talking about some of those skills and mindsets that were important for us. The conversation around deep, rigorous academic content, I assure you, is not going anywhere. We're going to dive into our last set here for conversation. We'll follow the same protocol. I'll invite you to take a few moments and talk about what we discussed now at your table, and then we'll begin to consider what we need to do before we leave tonight. Our 3rd shift that we would like to discuss is that of global interactions, specifically the environment. Mind you, this conversation tonight is not about a debate or a discussion on the merits or science behind. The discussion tonight is, what are the concerns of our students? So millennials tend to be some of our younger educators and can be some of our older students, but that's really outside that area. We're now talking about Gen Z. But millennial students, their number one concern as of 2019 was that of the environment. In fact, here we see the top millennial concerns graphed out, and you see that the number one concern they had was that of climate change, protecting the environment, and natural disasters. The argument in that space, in my mind, is that the world, since March of 2020, has been put on notice, and we've been sharing one germ. We all know that 2 years ago, we never thought we'd be in the space to do this. I mean, the fact that we're all sitting here right now is unique. So the reason I share that is because millennials had that concern well before. The conversation is, to what degree are our school experiences modeling what our concerns are? When are students provided the opportunity to solve real, authentic problems that they see in their world today? Or are they denied that opportunity because of what we believe in terms of what's acceptable? Second concern here, or thought in this space, I kind of touched on it, is the changing demographics of our society. Many of our social service organizations and programs were developed in the 1960s, when our population was somewhere in the neighborhood of 164 million, 179 million. We anticipate that population in the next 20 years, 30 years, being 400 million, nearly twice that. How does our changing demographics shift what our needs are for education in our society? This is not all about race. It's not all about ethnicity. This is also about one of the topics that was brought up from this table around socioeconomic diversity. We have students who have access versus students who don't have access. To what degree are those experiences being modeled and shaped for students to problem solve and experience? Additionally, we know that the pandemic hit certain demographics within our population at a higher rate. Again, I'm not just talking people of color, I'm also talking people in our senior citizens' homes and people of a certain age demographic where their impact was very real and they were caught up in kind of the noise around the global pandemic. The fourth way now is what I've already heard discussed here at great length tonight, and that's our human interaction. Here's the one that I really like to spend some time talking about, because this is the idea that our technology and our products have moved from something mundane, meaning just out of necessity, to something that can impact life at a greater level. What you see here, and I know we have several medical experts in the room, I am not one of them, but we have an fMRI machine, a machine intended to help diagnose and project issues for children. And this would look very different if the child understood what they were lying there to do and they weren't intimidated by it. Unfortunately, in order for a reading to happen, as I understand it, the child has to lie still and be able to be read and have the entire thing done so that their scan is correct or accurate. So this fMRI machine required a child psychologist, a medical doctor, a graphic designer, or artist to kind of say what's going to make a kid feel comfortable enough to lay there for the period of time that we need them to do. That it's really not just about the technology of the machine itself, but it's the opportunity for that machine to accomplish what we needed to accomplish in a more purposeful manner. And to that end, as educators in the room, how do we design meaningful learning experiences moving from the mundane to the functional? That's a lot of language, it's a lot of words, but it's really about, for the first time in human history, we really have the chance to focus on happiness. We can work to be happy. We can support ourselves and be happy. It's not we're working to just make an income so that we can survive. It's about an opportunity to really gain happiness. How do we create experiences that lend themselves to those ideas for students? It's not just about algebra, it's about algebra connected to, or whatever the topic. And how is it that we're looking at repurposing things across our society? 2 years ago, thank you very much, it is funny. I won't talk about the bottom left-hand corner, I guess, but 2 years ago, we already touched on masks. We saw all these people with these sewing skills doing this for their community. Some schools, you had to have a thermometer gun in order to get in and show you didn't have a fever. Touchless door openers can point, can touch, can do those types of things that are attached to our keychains. We've moved from what would have been an item used for one purpose before, and we've reused those items now. And in our factories, in our Honda plants, in our Toyota plants, in our Tesla plant, we saw them repurpose their assembly line for ventilators early in the pandemic. How do we repurpose learning and opportunities for students? Repurposing of art. Art will be inspired for generations to come. People will be able to look at our art and look back at this period in time and say, oh, that was pandemic art. That was social disruption art. I think that one idea that we can all agree on is that schools are created to help create an informed electorate, to continue our democracy. We've seen over the last 2 years how that informed electorate has changed significantly. Our changing demographics have created changing forms of communication, have created diversity across our republic, have created even more complex issues than have existed before. Forget the two-party system. I mean, there's almost 4 parties within one side of a party now. We can agree a must-have is an active and informed citizenry. What did that citizenry look like in months past? How well did people feel heard? Empathy is always an interesting one to me. Why, Steve, is empathy a landscape shift? How has empathy changed in the last generation? Well, let me ask this question. Teachers, at the very beginning of the pandemic, were you applauded? Nurses, at the very beginning of the pandemic, were you applauded for your work? Has that shifted? Conversation of empathy very quickly.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So why talk about connection and empathy relative to schools? Because for a long time, schools have seen our primary role is to help students get prepared for the workforce or college. Sometimes the same thing, sometimes separate. But a metacognitive study from 2010, and I get it, 2010 is a little bit old, but there hasn't been research to confront this or to directly object to it yet. Research from the year 2010 says one of the biggest concerns for college presidents is the ability for students to empathize with one another. So even if a student is successful in high school and we're sending them off to college and we think they're the valedictorian, we're really proud of this kid, and they go off and they can't empathize with their roommate, how successful are they going to be in college? What does it mean? Where is the kid taught to be empathetic? Maybe in the home, that's fine, and that can be one of our responses here. To what degree do we have a common understanding of empathy within Boone County Schools for what students need to know and be able to do? And again, I would say that we have seen this shift in the last 2 years. We all kind of marveled as we sat quarantined in our home as doctors and nurses left in New York City and went home, and every Wednesday night people gathered on their balconies and applauded for them. That has shifted significantly. Have you seen a school board meeting lately? The final interaction that we might consider is that of high concept, high touch. This means getting the most out of life. Technical skills matter, but they matter most when they are combined with empathy, compassion, and care. Listen to me again. Technical skills matter, but they matter the most when tied to empathy, compassion, and care. To what degree is that important here? We heard about fourth grade algebra, said somewhat tongue-in-cheek. We know that rigorous academic content is important. To what degree is this idea important for our students? Certainly, human interaction has been impacted in the last 2 years. Here's our next round. Opportunity for you to talk at your table. This one will be slightly shorter because I know some of the teams have already done it. Let's take 12 minutes. I'll bring us back together at 8:32. If you need to use the restroom during this time, please do so as well. We'll wrap up after this discussion, but have a discussion. Again, is this critical? Is this important? Is this interesting? Meh, but I don't really care. I would invite, same protocol as before. We'll flip up the order a little bit, and this time I am going to come to our student. I saw one of our students leave, so I didn't want to ping her for both times, but she'll finish this up tonight. If we could, can we have an educator? One thing I heard talked about at my table was, that's the invitation, an educator. Well, we're going to list this. I bet you can go again. I have every faith in the world because every teacher I've known can present in front of a group. But I'm going to invite a second educator maybe to come up. No disrespect, ma'am, whatsoever. I know. That's right. See, she wants to get out of here on time or early. Can I please have an educator come up? Now, I know you all ain't shy. Remember, when you start to get uncomfortable, that's when I like it. All right, I won't twist any arms. How about a parent? Somebody willing to come up and share. We're getting tired. Yes, ma'am. I saw your hand first. Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Give her some encouragement. Thank you very much, by the way.
Thank you. I'm Leanne Lux. My daughter is in second grade at Steeplechase, and I appreciate the encouragement to come up and talk about this one because since even getting this invitation, one of the things when I started thinking about the model student or the ideal picture that we wanted to paint, empathy is the one that just kept coming to my mind every time. I mean, I want to put that at the top of the list. So when you're talking at our table, it's the connection with empathy to every single one of these things. And if we don't have the ability to empathize, then we don't have the ability to take the environment into consideration and to make an impact on the demographic concerns, things like that. So empathy, something we discuss mostly at our table and how it's connected to everything else and how critical it is.
Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. How about a community member or business leader in the room that would be willing to come up and say, one thing we talked about at our table is, there are several of you in the room. Look at that, you're getting a fist bump from your table. How nice is that? Is there a community leader, business leader? Sir, please. Oh, thank you, sir. Round of applause. And we can make room for both of you if you'd like. Perfect. Thank you for that.
So my name is Rick Worth, and I'm CEO at Children's Home of Northern Kentucky, CH&K Behavioral Health, and we provide behavioral health care services to this great school district.
Wow.
We, at our table, were talking about the fact that this is a critical issue, human connectivity. We talked about the challenges that may not be so obvious, and we talked about the fact that in Kentucky, census is pretty clear that we may not have as much racial and ethnic diversity as other states. We talked about the fact that sometimes we're dealing with socioeconomic status diversity. We also talked about new and emerging groups of diversity, such as LGBTQ youth, and the challenges that come with accommodating all of these differences in the school district. We also talked about the fact that some of the table members had lived in other states, and we're cognizant of the fact that Boone County public school students will not simply be confined to the 120 counties of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. How are we equipping them in terms of human connectivity to live in areas of the country that may be much more diverse than these 120 counties of ours?
Round of applause, please. Thank you very much. And my short answer to that question is, one of the ways that Boone County is going to be addressing those needs for students is by having this conversation right here. So thank you very much for elevating that, sir. And now, my student friend, I sat with you, miss. Would you come up and share? This is pretty brave. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Well, hi, my name's Elena McEwen. I'm here both as a student of Ignite Institute. I'm a senior here, and I'm also here as the student board representative on the Boone County Board of Education. So I know this is really important to me, so thank you guys so much for being here. We talked a lot at our table, even kind of before it came up about diversity and empathy, and how important it is that we model that, that teachers model that for students, that administrators model that for students, that modeling, that learning that comes not just from being told things, not just from being told about situations, but also from seeing just how much things are affecting different students that come from different backgrounds. And we also talked a lot about how can we model to our diverse students, our LGBT, our people of color, our students of color, our disabled students, all of our minority students, how do we model to them that they're not alone? And how do we model to our able, to our white, to our straight, cisgendered, so on and so forth students that how do we help them reach out and understand the struggles of people that of people who have experiences that they can't even fathom because they've never had to fathom it. And I think it's really, really important that we keep that in mind when we're working on this sort of thing. How do we truly get that modeled behavior taught to our students when it's not something that can just be told, that has to be experienced to truly understand it, and how do we build that empathy?
Round of applause, please. So well said. Sir, you very well may want to bookmark that timestamp because that'll be impactful, and I appreciate it. The thing I pushed her on, I really didn't know she was the board rep in the moment. We were just having a conversation. The one thing I pushed her on is, and how often not only do you model it, because I believe you do you see other students having the chance to do that as well? She said, you know what, you might be surprised. People might be surprised. I think we have a chance to do that frequently, and I give you a lot of credit for that. Thank you. Here becomes our conversation. We started out with, how do these things matter to us? The invitation is this. Well, actually, let me back up first. The invitation is this. This is the moment of calibration. I know we gave you a note-taking device. Again, Mrs. Siddle's fantastic, and she keeps me on the straight and narrow. You have a note-taking device. I saw many of you kind of weighing down your individual thoughts on that. My request is that you'll use the QR code in the site to do it. Here's why that matters to me. We're not going to worry about a data entry mistake or discrepancy in that way. We're not going to worry about something else that might get in the way of making sure your data is clean for us when we disaggregate it and provide it back to the superintendent and his leadership team. Now, my accommodation and my attempt at empathy and understanding is you don't have to do it that way either. While I would prefer this because it makes everything easier, you don't have to do it. You could do it on the sheet. Eric and I will collect it up and we'll make sure that we'll do our best to input the data correctly. But let's be real, the way that it gets calibrated and is strongest is if you do it. So there's the first ask. The second ask before we leave is just as I shared with table 12, the discussion of we'll have the opportunity to look at what our deficits are in approaching these things, but we want to approach this from a growth mindset, from a mindset of an aspiration about where we want to go. We've talked about a lot tonight. We've talked about how the workforce has changed. We've talked about how human interactions have changed. We've talked about whether or not global inputs are important to us in Boone County. I say us because I'm with you right now. We talked about those things. Those things matter to you in different ways. And if they matter to you, and we approach it from the aspirational mindset, then what are your hopes, dreams, and aspirations for every child? Our board rep will be gone long before the portrait of a graduate kind of kicks in terms of this iteration. And that's okay, because this is a little bit of legacy work for you, young lady. This is an opportunity for you to influence what comes next. And something tells me you want to have that impact. I believe that about you. The question for you as the adults in the room is, what do we see as necessary? I'm sure that there are many things, and the reality is we can't accomplish everything in a strategic plan or in a portrait, but we can accomplish those things that you believe to be most important. So that's what we hope to glean from this. What are your individual hopes, dreams, and aspirations for every child in this county from this school district? When we do that, the place that you can do that is here under the Ideas tab. You'll see it. It comes up as what are your hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Here's what else I'll tell you. It's a dirty little secret. It's not a dirty little secret. I'm kidding. is that it'll stay open for an entire week. So I do owe this to your superintendent. I owe all of the data that is input tonight, but I also recognize that not everybody wants to sit here and type on a device and give us that input now. I'll be honest, the highest percentage of you that put it in now will do it. And wait a second. There is a percentage of you that when you walk out of here with the best of intentions, unfortunately life will get in the way and you won't do it. So if we have the chance to put that in, I really am asking for it because it will help and it will calibrate us. When we come together next, I think it was my table friends here at 14 who were, or maybe it was 22, who were discussing the competencies that are necessary to thrive in this space. Maybe it was 15. I'm sorry. One of our tables was talking about critical thinking and communication. That's actually what we're going to do next, is have the conversation around how important are these things and these ideas to us, given what our community thinks are important about the landscape shifts. So with that, Mr. Turner, Superintendent, sir, I welcome you up to close us out. A round of applause, please, for our superintendent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled and just very proud to hear all the conversation and to see all the interaction going on tonight. This has been a great process, and I hope that you do take it seriously in terms of putting in information, because that will be part of how we put everything together moving forward later on this spring. So I thank you for your time, and thank you for being out here and working with us. I think it's February 24th is our number two meeting at 6:30 here. It's great to visit with some of you, and I hope to visit with even more of you as well. Look forward to seeing you here in a couple weeks. Again, thank you very much for your time and all your work tonight.